Ladies and gentlemen, hello, and in this video I am going to show you how to implement our poor man's version of async and await using generator functions. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to be using this the fetch API, the browser fetch API. Is it the browser? Because I'll be running it on Node. So it's like the Node fetch API and also this dummy JSON.com dummy test data for URL. So I'm going to start by creating a generator function. Let's do our function and let's call it gen for now. And this will be we do this actual function and then the asterisk is there and then we call it gen, and this will be sort of like our own async function that would use await inside. But here's what we are going to put inside. So we are going to have a const data, which is actually a result of doing this, of yielding that. Okay, we all know that an F there. We all know that our fetch actually returns a promise, and in a generator function, okay, first of all, let me try to explain what a generator function does. So a generator function, what it does is it's a function that you can get into and then come back again. So it's a function that you can pause and come back to it again, unlike traditional functions whereby you can only get out of it when you return or when you reach the last curly brace. The generator functions can actually they have like multiple returns, quote unquote, right? You will use the yield keyword for you to be able to actually do that. So if you use yield, whenever we encounter yield, we are kicked out of that function. So in this case, for example, we are trying to assign value to data, but then we actually kicked out. We are kicked out with the return value, like a pause value, really, which is a promise. Okay, something that we can't rely on, because a promise can be pending, rejected, or fulfilled. Just like a promise in real life, you can't pay someone with promises, for example. So now let's see. So if you call gen like that, what do you think we are going to get? Do you think we will yield this? As I said, that we are going to be kicked out of the function. Do you think like this will automatically give this back to this function and we sort of like return a promise? Let's see. Let's console.log our gen, calling the gen, and see what comes out. So if I run it, you see what we get. It's an object, a generator object. And then, so it's really interesting and also, like surprising and long-winded also. So this generator function has actually, so say gen, let's say const. So now we understand that it's a generator function. So let's say const our gen is called calling this gen. So we now know that it's an object. I mean generator object. It's a generator object that we get. So what can we do with the generator object? The generator object actually has a property called next. A property called next. It's in a method actually called next. If we run it, what do you think we'll get? Let's console.log and see what's in there. And do this. You see, we get this. Right. So actually when we run next, that's when this function gets executed. When we run next So we like call the function, and then we return a generator object, and then we run next method on the generator object. That's when we actually start executing this function. So we start by doing this, trying to, we are declaring a constant data, and then we are trying to give it a value, but then before we give it a value, we yield it out, and this is actually returned here. What we yielded out is returned, but now it's not just returned as it is, but it's returned as an object with this one as the value, and whether we are done yielding or not, right, as the second object, which is done. In this case, we are not yet done yielding, so it's false. Now you can see that we have a promise here. So what we can do, we can destructure this one. We delete that part and this one, and we can say const. Let's destructure what is inside. We don't care about the done value. We only care about this part here, the promise. Okay, so we're destructuring it. So destructuring like this is as good as is like this actually. So like, I don't want to go deeper into destructuring, but when you are destructuring, you are basically saying, okay, inside this object, we want to get an attribute called value, and we want to give it a name called value. But we know that if an object is like this in JavaScript, when key and value are the same, we just do something like this. Right, so this is destructuring, but we don't want it to be called value because it wouldn't mean much. But let's call it data promise. Okay, and let's still confirm that it's still our promise. Data promise, and let us run. Yeah, it is our promise and it's pending. So what are we going to do with our pending promise? Okay, inside this function, actually, like what we would do in a normal, in a normal async await, would like console.log. But of course, I'm leaving the intermediate step where we would have like response.json as another promise we would then get data from. But here I would actually just say data for simplicity. And if you want, you can go ahead and implement the intermediate step. But now we are here, so we now have our data promise, which we can see is this promise here. We have our promise, so we can then it data dot then data promise. So we are now doing the promisey thing on it. Then what do we want to have? I think it starts with res out, and then inside there we want to return. Okay, before typing return, for it to make sense, we know that we say res.json to get the actual data. But now we don't want to do that for now, but we want to actually return it because we want to keep on thenning. And now this is where that res.json resolves with the real data. So we don't care about error handling for now, but here is where the magic comes in. So we can actually call our next gen again. Our gen.next again, like this. But now we give it data, right? So what does this mean? This means that we are now, when we call next, it's like we are now going back to the function we were kicked out of. So when we get back, we start from where we left. We were kicked back here, so that's where we start. So we start by assigning value to data, and this is the value, right? We've gotten it from our fetch, and now we are returning back with the data. And then I think that's it. So if we come here, we should see the data, coming from this endpoint here being console logged. Okay, let's just make sure that I'm telling the truth and run it. So it waited, and then we have it here. So just take time to analyze this code, and if you think this is sort of interesting to you, please consider subscribing, and also suggest for me any other topics which you feel like I should cover. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.